That was a hell of a speech that you gave, John. Congratulations. It was quite wonderful.
Is this going to be a monologue? Are you going to just keep going?
Well, I just thought I'd say a few words. I'd like to congratulate San Francisco for being the first of the Big 19 to hire a woman to be the executive director. Jennifer. Followed up by my hometown of Montreal, who has hired a wonderful woman, whose father, of course, I worked with. I can't work with your generation anymore. I'm too damned old. Jeff, you got something to say?
I think the other thing that San Francisco is doing, which is worth noting, is walking the walk in terms of engaging next generations.
For sure.
Most federations around the country still have children's tables at which the children approach age 50, 55. It's really terrific that San Francisco understands the culture of what's going on out here, and also understands, we're starting to understand in the East, that Jewish life is like the weather. It's coming from the West, and the innovations increasingly are coming from the West. Having said all those nice things, let's talk a little bit about the book, the new book.
What book?
The Art of Doing Good. That book that's going to take care of both of our retirements. So, want to talk about why we wrote it?
Yeah, but first of all, I want to say one other word about this group. Jews lie all the time. John, you didn't have that in your speech. If we're going to raise $200,000, we say we've raised $500,000. Now, normally, when we're told, Jeff and I, that we're going to speak to an audience of 200 people, 100 show up. In fact, I remember one time we went to Montgomery, Alabama, after we wrote our first book, and we were told we had to go to this temple in Montgomery, Alabama, where there would be 700 Jews who would want to hear our book.
And all buy them.
Right. There were 30. 30 people. It was a lovely trip. But today...
And the booksellers weren't there.
And today we were told there would be 200, and there's more than that. So Laura and everybody involved in this meeting, thank you so very much. And we hope we'll entertain you. Now the book, Jeff.
Yes.
Yes.
So we never thought we'd write a second book.
Right.
Right?
Right.
The classic story was we were negotiating our contract with a neighbor of yours, Josie Bass, for the first book, and our attorney called and said they want the right of refusal for the second book. And I said, give it to them. It's the sleeves of our vest. Lo and behold, we wrote the second book. Why? What motivated you? Because you were the one who. Well,
I guess it was the gold medal we got for the first book. And by the way, when we got that gold medal, I said to Jeff, well, I guess there was only one book on philanthropy written that year. And he said, no, there were 17. I said, oh my God. No, actually, the one criticism we had in the first book, which I think there are more lessons for this group, including ourselves, than there are in the second, is that it was pointed towards larger givers, foundations, and larger grantees. And so we decided to write the second book to show that if you have the passion, and the subtitle is Passion Makes Action, if you have the passion, it doesn't matter if you have any money or you don't have any money, but you can go and you can do. And I think, Jeff, you expertly pinpointed the hurdles you have to overcome in order to be successful. So money isn't the answer, passion is the answer. And in the first book, we said that, first of all, anything you do has to hit your soul. And we tried to point out in the first book, and I think we ought to spend a little bit more time on that. I'm going to pass the buck to you in a sec. There are a couple of things that are we think are terribly important. In the first place, most of us have been in business, so we say, well, what the heck? Now we've made our pile, we'll give it away, or we'll give a percentage away, and we can do that because we know how to do it. After all, we made $1 gazillion in business, so we can give a half $1 gazillion away just like that. That ain't true, folks. It just is not true. You have to spend as much time, energy, thought, and find others who you can partner with in order to make a difference in a tiny little niche like that. The question is whether you want to. And once you decide to do it, then you got to run it like a business, which means that you have to evaluate, you have to keep on changing your estimates of where you're going. You have to have goals, and you have to try to realize those goals. And if you don't, you got two decisions to make. Do you alter the goals, or do you quit and go on to something else? So those are, I think, some of the main, although you'll have other ones, Jeff.
One of the things we pointed out is that people don't pay much attention to their philanthropy. If Americans made money the way they give it away, we would be a very poor country. Because, successful people are very purposeful, intentional. Where we're going to college, who we're going to date, who we're going to marry, the ultimate question of all, where our child is going to go to preschool. There's an intentionality about everything we do, except when it comes to giving away money. Because ultimately we give away money for one of three reasons. One, it's part of our autobiography. My grandparents supported the Federation, my parents support the Federation, I'm going to support the Federation. It's part of who I am, my own DNA. Or it's about relationships. John is going to be honored by the ballet, and I like John. And then I sit at my checkbook and try to remember, now what's the name of that ballet company? It's all about the relationship. It's not
nice
about...
you're going to write John a check.
That's right. It's not
Good
about
for you. Hey, John, go get him right now.
The purpose. Good luck. And then the third purpose, the third bucket, is strategic philanthropy. That philanthropy that represents our soul, who we are. Paul Shervish is a professor at Boston College, and he's, for the past 40 years, a Jesuit, studied the motivations of philanthropy. And his profound, greatest finding is that a generation ago, people gave to nonprofits whose mission they wanted to support. Today, people give to those nonprofits who are helping them achieve their personal mission. That's a profound difference. And understanding that is critical for those organizations that are trying to raise money. And it's also powerful for those of us who want to give away our money intelligently. And if you were to, and I challenge you, at the end of the year, to sit and think about those three buckets and look at all your giving and see how much of it is autobiographical, how much of it is relationship, and how much of it is your own strategy, I think you'll be disappointed to find very little of it is your own strategy. And it's in your own strategy that you can change the world. So with that, why don't we spend a moment on the birth of Birthright? Because that was...
I wondered how long it would take to get around to Birthright.
Well, but there's an interesting... There are many backstories to Birthright. One of the backstories to Birthright is when Charles's late wife, Andy, and Charles and I began to work together. We spent the first number of months trying to figure out a strategy. And Charles had just finished leading an effort called the Israel Experience, which was aimed at bringing high school students to Israel. And Charles is a brilliant businessman. He spent $19 million on this project. The goal was to bring more kids to Israel. At the end of 6 years and $19 million, no more kids were going. And that is a wonderful example of noble failure, because the success of Birthright is built on every lesson that was learned on the noble failure of the Israel Experience. So as we are starting to work together, the three of us as a team, we developed a series of games, exercises, to try to understand our soul as a team. And one of them was, many of you know JTA, the Jewish Telegraphic Association. They have a daily bulletin of news, most of it bad because it's the Jewish Telegraphic Association. But we dummied up a JTA report 4 years hence, 4 years in the future. And I asked Charles and Andy to take a look at the 18 stories that were in that dummied up report and rank them in terms of impact, importance, and personal resonance. And the one that came out by far #1 was 10,000 kids go to Israel. And that was a piece of extracting what Charles and Andy saw as what they wanted to achieve, how they wanted to change the world. And you know, philanthropy is the love of humankind, but it's also about how you want to change the world. So let's fast forward to 1998, and you're in Jerusalem. What happens?
Well, then I had met Michael Steinhardt before in New York, liked him a lot. Andy, my late wife, had met Judy Steinhardt, liked her a lot. And the next thing we knew, we were involved with the Israel Museum. I always claim that the Steinhardts own the Israel Museum. They don't really own it, but they have a lot of influence as to what happens. And we were at a party for that museum at their annual conclave, and Michael said to me, "I'd like to talk to you." Yossi Balin, who at that time was the Deputy Minister of Finance, had cornered both Michael and me individually and had suggested that all 17-year-olds get a voucher for a trip to Israel, all Jewish 17-year-olds. And I asked him where he'd find the money. It was sort of a reasonable answer, or a question, I should say. And he said, "We take it from the Jewish Agency." Now, I know a lot of you like the Jewish Agency, if Yossi didn't, because they put the money down the sewer. So I said, "Well, Yossi, that may or may not be, but it ain't going to happen because politically it just is not in the cards." So he spoke to Michael. Michael thought that it could happen. So we had a chat. And I said, "But it's not going to happen. And if it doesn't happen, it's a scheme to bankrupt the Jewish world. It's too expensive." And that was the beginning of our negotiation. And then Jeff and Yitz Greenberg, who was running Michael's philanthropy at the time, and I, just the four of us, we negotiated for a year. Now, we did not include the federations. We did not include the government of Israel. And it was only later that we got around to inviting philanthropists to join us. Now, had we negotiated with those people, and I'm not knocking anybody, please believe me, there would never have been a birthright, because the first trips went in December 1999, and in the fall of 2000, the Intifada started. And we would have still been negotiating, and we would have been negotiating to 2003 or 2004, and the time would have gone by, and people would have been terrified to do such a thing. One of the times I was most proud of all my colleagues, we were terribly lucky in being able to engage a man named Shimshon Shoshani, who had twice been the general manager, the director general of the Department of Education of the Israel government. And Shimshon was a wonderful, and is a wonderful, wonderful man. And he set together a whole list of things that the trip organizers had to abide by. And we, under his tutelage really, we got going. And the first trips did go in December of 1999. We did some very audacious advertising at US and Canadian colleges. One of them, for instance, said, "Sometimes it's tough to be Jewish," and showed a bris going on. And sometimes it's not, and showed some scantily clad ladies and gentlemen on the beach in Tel Aviv. So I remember my wife saying, "How the hell can you do a thing like that? That's terrible." And I said, "Yeah, but it sells." So we had 12,000 applicants for 8,000 spots for that fall. So we knew that part was good. We didn't know if the trips were any good. And I think it was you, Jeff, who hired Brandeis, who were the doctors know of market research, because we really wanted to have kosher market research. We were using other people's money. And there was Len Sachs and Charlie Kadushin, who were the heads of it, and they could not believe their ears. We didn't know if the trips would be any good. They couldn't believe their ears, their eyes, or anything else, because the numbers were astonishing, and they still are. So that's how it got going. And then the government came along and started to help. Now they're helping big time. We didn't know there would be a man like Mr. Adelson come along and give us huge money. But our problem is the waiting list. And the problem with the waiting list is that if you've been on the waiting list a couple of times, the third time you're probably not going to go, even though you get priority when registration opens. And so those who we miss probably will opt out, because our target market is kids who have either been turned off or who never have been turned on. And our whole premise in doing all this is go find your roots, you make a decision, decide whether you want to be Jewish or not, and you set the goals. You say what Jewish is, we're not going to tell you. And damn, it works. But that's not the story of the book.
No, but it's an important lesson about the combination of the soul and a business plan.
Right.
Because Birthright is run like a business. It's a franchise operation. McDonald's has nothing on Birthright when it comes to everything from secret shoppers on buses and educational logistical guides and the ability to handle extraordinary numbers. 400,000 kids, 13,000 from San Francisco, 62 countries, 60,000 Israeli participants, most from the IDF, from the Israel Defense Forces. And you know, one cannot go to Israel and not be astonished by how many buses there are running around with the Birthright logo. It is really, I think, an example of the points that we try to make in the book, and it's been amazing. And the most amazing part of it, and this is the key, we believe that you cannot improve what you can't measure. And in working with charitable organizations, coming together to really focus on goals and objectives and how one measures impact is absolutely critical. And it's even more critical. We just completed a study of millennials who are parts of very major giving families. And the big difference between the millennial giver and his or her parent and grandparent. Good news is 90% learned their philanthropy from their parents and grandparents. The major difference is they're looking for impact. And so the ability to understand impact becomes absolutely critical. You own a baseball team.
Yeah.
People, you know, this is a
Wish it was the Giants.
This is a business. This is a business breakfast. Is baseball a business?
When you sell it, it's a business. and if you have enough money, it's a good tax write-off.
I'd like to invite you to join our conversation in the few minutes we have left. If there are questions, just get up and introduce yourself and feel free to ask any question. And if you don't, I will.
Oh, come on.
There are microphones moving around. Right, sir?
Hello, my name is Martin Canova. I have the honor and pleasure to serve as board chair of Keshet, which is one of Slingshot's, whatever your name is for the standard bearers among Slingshot, and thank you for your support through the years. As your foundation is sunsetting over the next 3 to 4 years, and as you're committed to both measurement and ongoing growth in innovation and engagement, I'd love to hear your vision of of what you want to make sure you make happen among the Slingshot organizations that you have been fostering.
Before Jeff answers that, could I just spend a minute telling you about Sunset? Because it's become a little bit controversial as to whether a foundation should go on forever or whether it should live and when the founders go away or when at a certain time they should cease. In our particular case, my children were very well taken care of by their grandfather, so they had their own wealth. And we asked them whether they'd like to join our foundation. They said, no, that's yours. We're going to have different agendas in our generation, which they've had, by the way. And they said, don't worry about us. We'll both be heavily engaged in philanthropy. By the way, my son will be the 2014 campaign chair of Montreal. So, and he's done an awful lot of other things in the community. And my daughter and son-in-law in Los Angeles founded and are the heads of still City here in Los Angeles, which has been fantastic. So we decided in 2001, after we had a terrible tragedy, business tragedy called Vivendi in the Seagram Company, and we suddenly found ourselves in the foundation not nearly as wealthy as we had been, so we had to make a decision. Do we spend a lot less and keep going forever, or do we spend as much as we reasonably can, which would be a lot more than otherwise, and have a spend down program? And we chose 2016 because I would reach a certain age by that time, that age to not be discussed publicly. And so we chose that, and it seemed like 15 years was a heck of a long time. All of a sudden, it's 3 years away. But Jeff will tell you how we've been handling it and what we're doing about it, because I think that part is very exciting.
The default position for foundations often is perpetuity. Perpetuity is a long time. And Henry Ford is probably the best example. Henry Ford is doing somersaults in his grave as his money is being spent to do progressive things in Israel, among other things. You know, just think about Henry Ford's reaction to the Ford Foundation supporting progressive action in Israel. You know, it's mind-boggling. And this comes back to the issue of intentionality. Bill and Melinda Gates have decided that their foundation is going to spend down 50 years after the death of the last of them. More and more donors are being thoughtful because in some ways they would like their money spent based on their values. And that doesn't always happen in perpetual foundations. As we face the spend down, one of the things we discovered is there aren't many foundations that have spent down and recorded in any way what they've done. So we're being very transparent and public about the spend down. We have the URL www.spenddown.org. We are capturing everything we're doing. The Chronicle of Philanthropy is publishing all of the things we're doing, including our mistakes, because we believe we have an obligation to teach the field. And the key element, we've stopped our grant making, and we're focused on the long-term commitments we made. And the 9 organizations, Slingshot, and I'm going to come back to Slingshot in a moment, being one of them, that are going to survive long after we're gone, and that we've incubated over time. So we're putting a lot of effort with consultants and ourselves and others in making sure that these are sustainable organizations that have healthy governance, that have healthy balance sheets, and that's where most of our time is being spent. Now to Slingshot and Keshet, one of the, if there's another piece that led to our success is we believe we are athletic listeners. We really try to listen to the people we work with and people we work with in the next generation. So we started a program a number of years ago called Grand Street, where we took 18 to 28-year-olds who are going on their family foundation boards, a number of whom are from San Francisco. And we trained them both in the history of Jewish philanthropy and in philanthropic strategy. And it's really neat. And one year, one of them said, well, why isn't there a Zagat guide for innovative Jewish programming? And we said, that's a good idea. Andy Bronfman, who was one of the most relentless people in the world, stalked Tim Zagat for 6 months. He wouldn't return her calls. That made it a challenge. She finally got him on the phone and said, we want to use your name to create a Zagat guide for Jewish innovation. He said, I can't make any money on it. No. So we named it Slingshot. And there's an annual guide of the 50 best Jewish innovative programs in the country, Keshet being one that's been in there from practically the beginning, selected by a panel of experts in the field. Amy being one of the judges. I shouldn't tell that because the judges remain confidential. So now you know who to pressure, but she's only one of 25 votes. That guide has taken on a life of its own because the next question the grants readers started to ask is, well, if these are the best programs, why don't we have a fund for them? And indeed, we provided matching funds for a number of years, we don't any longer, to create a Slingshot fund. And like your IGI and other donor circles, there is nothing like learning philanthropy by doing philanthropy. And it's just been a great, great, powerful lesson. I'm watching the time. One last question. Sir. We'll take two. We'll take them both at the same time, and then we'll try to respond to both of them.
Hi, hi, hi. Former Brandeis board members.
Could you share with us the specific way or ways in which you evaluate young people coming back from birthright?
Yes.
Taking both together.
Oh, we're going to take them both together, please.
How do you think about the distinction and allocation and so forth of Jewish versus non-Jewish?
Which one do you want to take?
I'll take the birthright one. That's more fun. As Charles pointed out, from the very beginning, we established 5 principles for birthright that are the core principles not to be changed. And one of them is that evaluation will be part of the core budget of birthright. So as a result, there's never been as much data available on literally 600,000 young Jewish adults, because it's our control group are those who apply and don't go on a trip. So it's a perfect situation. You've got, you know, in San Francisco, 100% of the young people who apply look alike. They're very similar. 53% go, 47% don't go. And we have the perfect control of what the differences are. Birthright is about 3 things. 1, increased Jewish identity and a sense of one's personal identity. 2, increased connection to Israel. And 3, increased connection to the Jewish people. And what Brandeis has developed is a series of ways of measuring that. What's identity? Identity is a combination of cognition, knowledge, what you know, behavior, what you do, and emotion, how you feel. And so they measure along those 3 axes on things like connection to Israel. And one of the surprises is the connection increases over time. You'd think it would wear off. One of the questions they ask is, do you get daily information about Israel, and from where? Well, one of the things that's happened over time is more and more of the alumni get their information from the Israeli newspaper websites. They go on to Haaretz and the Times of Israel and Jerusalem Post to get their information. There are measures on, now we have longitudinal data, on marriage, on trips back to Israel. So it's all very objective measures that have been enormously useful. And we'd be glad to send you the reports from Brandeis.
Second question. When we first started the foundation, we came up with two slogans, as it were. One was the enhancement of Canadianism, because I lived in Canada, as did my late wife at the time. And this was pre-Jeff, by the way, and pre our moving to the United States. The other one was the unity of the Jewish people whose soul is in Jerusalem. Now, unity of the Jewish people, of course, is a myth, but we thought we'd give that a shot. One of those, and we didn't put numbers behind them. We just said, well, these are two things we like to do. And of course, they're both very broad categories. And as we made our mistakes, which we did, holus bolus, then we started to narrow down what these objectives were going to be. So on the Canadian end, we wound up doing a series of 1-minute commercials, as it were, about Canada, about heroes. I don't believe any society can live, and you think of your own societies, both the Hebrew and Jewish one and the American one, you can't live without heroines, heroes, and myths. Canada had none of them. And you'd ask a Canadian who he or she was, and the answer would be, I'm not American, I'm not English, I'm not French. So you say, well, that's fine, but what are you? I just told you. That was it. Now, that, fortunately, has changed well over time, and we like to think we had something to do with it. And that is now a major public foundation, because we found a way. It got too big for us, so we found a way to join forces with others. The other part really morphed into Birthright Israel. And by the way, I just want you to know one thing, that when our foundation shuts down, that does not mean our philanthropy shuts down, because we will continue our philanthropy. But then we went off course a little bit, and we got involved with the Israel Museum. We got involved with Mount Sinai Hospital in New York, which may or may not be considered Jewish, because all the hospitals now are Jewish, run in New York. And I just made my last major gift, which was to rename the hall where the IPO plays in Tel Aviv, and that will last, we hope, for 40 years. But we just didn't put numbers to it. It worked out, I guess, over time, that we give much more to Jewish causes than to non-Jewish. And we're very, very happy with what we've done. We think we've had a hell of a good run. And by 2016, although actually 2 years ago, our morale was pretty low. Jeff's was, mine was. Obviously, our colleagues' morale was pretty low, because nobody knew, well, when am I going? When's the hatchet fall? Jeff handled it brilliantly. And today, our executives are in great demand, or have been in great demand. They're all in very good shape. Our programs are in good shape. So we're very happy, and we'll see how it turns out for the next 3 years. And then we'll look back, never in anger, but in joy with what we've done and how we're going to continue to do. And we'll do it without a lot of overhead. But we'll have a good time. And we hope, the one thing I hope that you get out of this meeting is, if you're going to do philanthropy, please remind yourselves of two things. Be very serious about it, and decide which niche, if any, you really want to do, which part of the world you want to make better, and go do it. And thank you all very, very much.